Right. Um, this is a an application that was developed using the WEM Modeler platform. It's an application that was used for a company that manufactures gates. And what they were looking for is something to help speed up the whole process of preparing the quotes for the application. And we've done some additional work that comes along with that as well. So these are the kind of gates that we're looking at manufacturing. There are different types of gates. These are called infill panels in the top, which are something like a fence that sits around a property. This is what they would call pedestrian gates or a manually operated gate. And it's a swing gate because you would swing the gate open inside. These are what they would call sliding gates, and it's an automatic sliding gate, so it'll automatically slide along that fence line over there when it opens and then closes. And these are the automated swing gates. Just to give you some idea as to what it actually looks like. So when they are manufacturing gates of this nature, they are building the full frame and the fills that actually are included within the internal of the gate, as well as the motor and any of the tracks that are necessary to actually result in that swing of the gate. So that was a swing gate. This is what a sliding gate looks like. So the sliding gate will move along certain rollers, or as they call it, a sliding block, and it moves along a track. So you've got to build a track which fills the space of the gate, plus also an additional portion along a fence line, so that the gate slides in within the property, but along the side. This is the what they call a sliding block, and the sliding block will move up and down as the gate moves. And this is particularly used when the ground itself is a tapered ground. So this is just to give you some idea as to what it looks like in a manufacturing of gates of this nature. So what we have developed for them is a quotes application. This will sit on their company page, and they will be able to log into the application, which provides that security only for those that have access and have been given access to it. I have logged in as an administrator, and with an administrator, there are certain functions that are only peculiar to the administrator, such as being able to generate accounts and to create accounts for their employees. This could also be extended to any customers as well at some later stage, if they want their customers to have access to generating a quote for themselves. And there's another function over here, which is basically to allow them to change any of the information that they have with respect to their account. So this ability to create new users is a function of the administrator. And the settings that are over here, there are certain settings which are only peculiar for the administrator. A general user of the system will not be able to see some of these things. There are some basic parameters that need to be set up initially, and the administrator, of course, will set up these parameters, things like the email address, the reply email address. There are certain things to do with the dimensions and the manufacturing process of the gates, such as the gate tail. If you remember the sliding gate, they've got to have an extension to the bottom rail of that gate as part of the manufacturing process. These three over here to do with extensions have to do with the depth at which the posts that support the gate have to be buried within the ground. And there are various other things to do with this, the gap size, etc., etc. And besides that, they have the ability to set up the identification of each of the different types of records, customer ID, product ID, etc., which says that, for example, with the quotes, they may want to have a quote which starts at a certain numbering sequence that they want to have. Well, this is where the administrator will be able to set up what is the initial numbering system that is used for identifying the various records in the system. Then what they want to be able to do is to load up all the supplies that they have, and this is already loaded with a number of different supplies. If they want to add more supplies, they can generate that individually, providing the details of the supplier, or they can use an import system. So if you have an Excel spreadsheet of supplier details, so I'll use one that we have over here. So you specify that and you import it. I'm not going to do that at the moment, simply because the file that is used is a commercial file, and it's got some sensitive information in it, so I won't do that. But this is the supplies that they can actually load. In a similar fashion, they want to load the products, and when they're loading the products, there are a number of different categories, the basic categories that they have in the manufacturing of a gate. So, for example, the posts, which provide the support for the gate, it provides the details of that post, of that part, and with suppliers that they have which are providing that part, and the last update when the prices were updated for that part as well. And this will have some implication later on when they use the part for a particular quote. It'll identify and say whether that part price has not been updated for over 180 days, and just gives them a warning on that kind of thing. So you can see that it can have a number of different parts provided by different suppliers. And it just contains a whole list of parts. In a similar fashion to what I said earlier on, you can load the parts up either individually by generating a new part, and you can select the suppliers which are on the record, which is going to provide that part detail over here. Or you can load it from a Excel file, which will load all the parts that are identified. So maybe a supplier provides them with a list of parts. They can take that list, modify it into the format that is required to upload, and that can be uploaded directly into the system. The other thing is that they may want to do is to upload a list of customers. So you can upload a list of customers that maybe because they've migrated from someplace, or they've got a list of customers maybe from a set of leads. One of the keys that they want to actually use over here, what has been designed in the system to actually use, is a set of templates. And these templates provide a standard set of parts that are required for the manufacturing of different gate types. So this is an infill panel, which, as I said, is something like a fence. And we've set up different types of infill panels. And these things called tubes, slats, and square tubes They are the fills that occupy the internal frame of a gate. So you may be using slats, or you may be using tubes or colorbond sheets or wooden pickets, things like that way. So the different types of gates are the infill panel, a swing, so you can see that this is a swing, this is a sliding. So we've got different types of templates. Now what those templates provide, and let's take a look at the swing template. The administrator would need to go through and identify all the parts that are required for a swing gate. So example is posts, there's the frame, which is the rail, and because we're talking about tubes, the tubes need to have in the rail itself punches into which the tubes are inserted. Gate stops, because this is a swing gate, so where the gate will actually stop. Hinges, wheels, caps, concrete, if they have to put any of the supporting parts of it into dirt, then they've got to stabilize it by using concrete. And because this is an automated gate, then there's things to do with motor. There's powder coating of the frame, and then there are a number of services to do with the concreting, the manufacturing of the gate, and the installation of the gate itself. So basically, these templates are set up by the administrator as part of the standard parts list for a particular type of a gate. What this does is to help speed up the whole process of generating quotes for a customer. So that is essentially what an administrator will have access to. Some of these parts, these options over here, for example, a product or managed gates, may be given to users to actually use as well, for them to generate. But there are certain things like the basic parameters, which are reserved for the administrator only. Then they want to manage customers, so the customers that are available on the system, the details of the customer with respect to the address, email address, and phone numbers, and whether it's a prospect, and that changes in terms of the type of status that the customer is at. This is not a customer relationship management system. It is simply a customer management system, because it doesn't go beyond simply managing the list of customers that are there. But that can be expanded if necessary, and they want to provide a more broader customer relationship management system. The next thing that they want to look at is to generate quotes. So we have a list of quotes over here, and if you want to generate a new quote for a customer, you have the list of customers whose details you have previously set up, and you select a particular customer, and it provides you with the details of that customer. You can also identify the location at which the customer's address is identified. So if they want to find out really, where is it, that is available on the system. But with each customer that you have, that customer may have one or more different types of gates. For example, they may have a swing or a sliding gate for the entrance into the property, and as well they may have infill panels which fill out the fence line of the property. So each one of those different types of gates requires a different quote. So you could create a new gate quote for each of those different types of gates. Now, one of the other things to note over here is that a customer's address may be different from the location of the site at which the gate is to be installed. For example, a real estate agency may actually be the customer themselves, but and that's what their address over here is, but the location at which the gate is to be installed could be very different. And that's what this location is. There is an ability to capture photographs of the location and to load a couple of photographs into the system, but that will depend on the browser that's being used and whether the browser allows the camera to be linked to an application. And generally, if you're using that on a desktop, that is possible with Chrome or with Internet Explorer. On a lot of the mobile devices, that is not possible to directly link it in there. So with each gate quote that you're defining, there's a certain set of specifications that they can actually provide for the type of gate that is being installed, and they can do this on site. The application that is being built over here is available immediately both on a desktop and on a mobile device. It doesn't require any other kind of modification to make it available on a mobile device. So if they have a tablet or they have a smartphone and they go out to the location to size it up and to look at the general condition of the location, they can actually specify these details right there at the location itself. So they can specify what type of gate they want. Maybe they want a gate both in the front of the property and the back of the property, so they can say how many gates do they want at that particular site location. Things to do with manual or sliding or automated swing or sliding gates. Some of the swing gates are what they call single or double leaf, and that simply means it's either a single frame that moves, or it's a dual frame that moves synchronized with each other. There are other things to do with the ground condition, and tapered is particularly relevant because if it's a sliding gate and the ground condition is tapered, then they've got to use a sliding block, not rollers. And there are various checks that are done within the application to see under these conditions, have you got the right number of parts? Have you got the right parts? Is there any missing parts, etc.? The ground type, whether it's dirt paving, and this has particular relevance for sliding gates where they've got to put a track on the ground on which the sliding gate will move. And if it's a concrete ground surface, then they have to have a bolt-on track. If it's a dirt surface, then they've got to lay a concrete track on the ground on which the gate will slide. Some gates are supported by a freestanding post. Others, maybe it's attached to an existing pillar, or it's attached to the wall if that already exists over there. So it provides that kind of variation in there. Sometimes for the purpose of strength, or because there's already an existing post in place, they may have 1, 2, or 4 posts in that position. Then you specify the height of the gate that is wanted and the gap size. So the gap size is the opening into which the frame of the gate will be positioned. Now that doesn't necessarily mean the size of the gate, because there's some other things to be taken into account in the manufacturing of the gate. For example, if it's a sliding gate, there's an overlap that in which the gate doesn't actually fit exactly into the gap size. There's about 100 millimeters on either side of the gate, so it's actually sitting behind pillars in terms of the frame of the gate. If it's a swing gate, then you've got to take into account the dimensions for the hinges and the gap into which the gate swings and locks in place. So these are the things that also need to be taken into account. But this is actually giving you the ability to specify if the gate is not a strict rectangle. Maybe it's a sloping surface, in which case it is a trapezoid, not a rectangle. So the dimensions of the top and the bottom and the sides could be different. So they can actually specify that difference over there. The other thing to note over here is whether there's a proximity to the power, because if it's an automated gate, then it needs power at the gate itself, and sometimes that may not be available, in which case either the customer provides the electrical power from some power source at the house itself or the residential building, and they will lay the cable to the gate, or if they're not doing that and that is required as part of the quote, then you've got to provide the costing in for laying that cable as well. The other thing is, what is the gate filled with? Is it filled with slats, tubes, COLORBOND sheets, or pickets? So according to what is specified in terms of the fills, there are certain questions that are asked as to how many slat panels, for example, are required in there, or what is the spacing size between slats, because some customers may want only 20 mils between the spacing, some may want 80 mils, etc. So that provides them with the ability to provide that kind of thing. Now, having got the basic specifications of the gate, what they can then select is the particular type of template that they want to use. Now, I've only got over here one template for square tubes, but they could have, for example, a swing gate auto manual. And with each of the auto manual, they can say, okay, the fills are either square tubes, round tubes, slats, COLORBOND, etc. So they can select over here that particular template, which means they have basically now prepared the quote as a standard quote with the parts that are required. So having selected the template and got the specifications for the gate, they can go ahead and prepare the BOM. And in preparing the BOM, what they now have is a whole list of the parts that are standardly applied from the template. In some cases, they may want to do some particular swapping. Maybe they want to swap suppliers because the template comes with particular supplies in a part. And if they want to swap and change motors, for example, they can delete that motor that they were had set up in the template, and they can go to the automation over here, get a list of motors, and they can add a different motor in here. Now, in adding the part into this thing, into the list of bill of materials, what it's also doing is calculating the optimal number of parts of that material that is required. And this particularly has relevance for things like the posts, the frames, and the fills, where they come in particular sizes from the supplier, and they have to be cut and then welded together in certain fashions, or attached in certain fashions. So they want to work out really what is the optimal number of parts to supply, to purchase from the supplier, so that they are not oversupplying, and how much they need to charge the customer. So what we see over here is two aspects. One is the number of parts that actually need to be used, and the number of the number of units that are going to be charged to the customer. And that has relevance to whether the remnant of the cut that is made, or the amount of the part that is used, can be reused. And as part of the basic parameters that have been set up, they can specify, for example, if any part is greater than 40% of what is purchased from the supplier, then it's reusable. If it's less than 40%, then it goes on the scrap heap, because it's hardly likely that they're going to use that. And therefore, what it means for the customer is that if they are purchasing a part that can be the offcut is reused, then they will only charge the customer for what is being used. If the offcut is basically put on the scrap heap, then they will charge the customer for the full amount. So all of that calculation is done and presented to them, and you now have the list of parts plus the costing for it. As part of what I just did was to save that bill of materials to go ahead. But you may remember that the fills that were in the gate, I specified that as being slats. But if we look at the parts list that have come through from the template, the parts list says tubes. So there are a number of checks done at this point in time to say, have you got a motor, because the gate is is an automated gate? Have you got the electrical cables, because the customer wants us to supply the electrical cables for the power source? All these kind of tests and checks are done at this point in time, and a whole list of what are inconsistencies is now presented to the customer in the application. So in this case, as I said, and perhaps I'll do this cancel and show you this again. So you can see that I've got slats, but the bill of materials, as you can see from here, is square tubes. So if I change that to square tubes, and I go through and prepare the bill of materials again, we're still using that same template, which has got square tubes. There are no inconsistencies between the type of gate and the bill of materials that is being prepared, so it's all ready to go now. So we've just generated a quote, and of course I'm talking a lot, but what previously used to happen is that they would take a lot of these details of the gate specification on site on pieces of paper, just writing it down, and they would come back and using spreadsheets, they would calculate the parts that are required and then prepare a quote. It was taking them somewhere between half an hour to 40 minutes per gate to develop a quote per gate. What can be done using this application is it reduces it to about 2 minutes. And most of it actually can be completed on site itself. So by the time they come back to the office, the quote is ready to go. Now, when the quote is ready to go, and let me pick on this one, they can generate PDF. Now, what the PDF is basically showing is here's a bill of materials for a customer quote. It's the same bill of materials we're talking about, but they can download that to PDF and Excel documentation. Just remember that this is in a demo environment, development environment in the WEM modeler, so things may be a little bit slower than if it's running in a live environment. So what's provided over here is a bill of materials in a PDF format and a bill of materials in a spreadsheet format, and also a quote in a PDF format. For each gate that is being quoted for, you will get this documentation. Because this has, I think, just a single gate, yes, it does. What it now provides is a summary, and in the summary, if you've got multiple gates, it will show multiple gates, and it's giving you a summary of the total quote that is requested from the customer. What it also does, if there are multiple gates, it will try and optimize the parts over the multiple gates. For example, a frame requires steel bars, which are then cut according to size. So if you've got multiple gates, then it will optimize it over the gates to say, can we reduce the number of steel bars that we need to order from a supplier? In addition, it also provides you with an ability to say, okay, we can actually give customers a discount. So it'll apply a discount that you may want to give to a customer. So you've got individual quotes for each gate, plus a summary if there are multiple gates. One of the reasons why you want to have individual quotes for gates is because if the customer only looks at your total quote and then says, no, I don't want to have an infill panel, I only want to have the swing gate, then you want to make sure that this is the price for the swing gate. Whereas if they have 5 gates, it may be that the 5 gates provides a better optimization of the parts, and therefore as a total of 5 gates, the price will be lower than for each individual of those 5 gates. Once they have generated the PDFs and the Excels and the quotes for the gates, and they close it, it basically asks a question. I'll do it over here because I've already closed that one. So it says close. It basically marks it now as completed because it's only after you've completed the quote can you then submit it to the customer. That's the way the app has been set up. So when they close it, it provides you with this option to actually send to the customer. When you send the quote to the customer, it sends it via email, and once it's sent to the customer, then the quote is actually locked. So this quote will not be able to be changed if I do the send to the customer. The only thing that can then happen is that the quote can be revised by generating another revision of the quote. So there will be another item over here, 1004 revision 1 for the same customer. It copies the quote and the bill of materials for each of the gates that have been already provided, and then you can make modifications and submit a new quote to the customer. Once a customer orders the quote, or orders a gate on the basis of a quote, I don't have this over here as examples, but what it brings up is that this quote has been ordered by a customer, and you can now generate from that the purchase orders to the supplier for each of the parts that are on the bill of materials for that supplier. In addition, it'll provide a list of, let's say, a work order for how the parts should be prepared. So if it's steel bars, from each steel bar, what are the size of the cuts that are required from that steel bar? How many cuts are to be taken from each of the frame or the posts, etc. It's not a stock management system, but it provides the basis on which a stock management system can be built. So that's basically what is made available in the account and in the quote system. It was developed in probably about 3 to 4 weeks, spaced out over a little bit of a longer duration. The estimation for developing this kind of an application using conventional methods is probably somewhere around 5 to 6 months. Just in terms of bringing this together using conventional methods of either CSS, JavaScript, etc.